Welcome to Yarnspirations.com. My name is Brittany and I teach over at Bee Hooked Crochet, and I'm really excited to teach you how to crochet the Sleepy Sloth Lovie. This is a free pattern, of course, that's available by Yarnspirations.com. You'll go to Yarnspirations.com and print your free pattern, gather your supplies, and this tutorial is going to walk you through the entire project. Let's get started. So we're going to begin our lovie with the body or the blanket portion. So you want to direct your attention to that part of the written instructions. You're going to grab color A and work a slip knot. And now we want to chain 83. So the one that's on our hook never counts as one of our chains. We're going to just begin by yarning over and pull through. Okay, so that's the first chain, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. We want to have a total of 83. Now you want to be careful that you're counting these as you go along, because with this being sort of a fuzzy novelty yarn, the stitches can be a little bit more difficult to see, especially if this is one of the first times you're using this type of yarn. Now, as you can see it from here, you can see the braid pretty well of the chain. So you can see each one of the V's. Now, if you're comfortable counting like that, of course you can do so. If not, I would definitely recommend that you count as you go so you can keep track. We want to have a total of 83 chains. Now, for the body of the lovie, we have a pretty simple 2-row pattern repeat. So I have my chain of 83 here. I'm going to work a single crochet in the second chain from the hook. So we have this loop on our hook that's not counting as our chain. And then I'll point your attention to this V right here. So that is the first chain from the hook. I'm going to go down to the next one. And when I'm working with novelty yarns like this, I really like to just work in the top loop of the chain. I find that it's so much easier to do that. So we're going to single crochet in that second chain from the hook, and then we're going to double crochet in the next. So when you're looking at it from this angle, you can see the next V right here. That's where I want to work a double crochet. And again, I'm just catching that top loop of the stitch or of the chain. And that's our repeat, believe it or not. We're just going to single crochet into the next chain, double crochet into the next. And you'll get into a rhythm here. You'll be able to start feeling and seeing where the next chain is. So when you stretch things out a little bit, you can see where the previous stitch was coming from. So where that double crochet is coming from, you can kind of see that hole there. And then I'm just going to follow that right to the next line over. That's going to give me my next chain. Now I just wanted to bring this into focus even more closely so you can really see what's going on. Now, as I mentioned, this is a very simple stitch repeat, but if you're new to working with novelty yarns, then you might have a little bit of trouble knowing where to work your hook. So I've just finished a double crochet, and I know that because it's much taller than the one next to it. So you're not going to be able to identify your stitches quite as well as you would with a really smooth yarn. So I'm really going to focus in on where that last stitch is coming from. So if I pull up on it, you can sort of see a little gap. And then you're just going to follow that down. You see this line that's right here, that loop. That's where you're going to work your next stitch. So the next stitch is supposed to be a single crochet. So we'll work that single crochet. And we can do that again. So pull it up. You can sort of see the little hole there. And find the line that's coming from that hole. We're going to double crochet there. And this is our stitch repeat. So we're just going to alternate single crochet and double crochet until we get to the end of our chain. The other thing that's really going to work in your favor is counting as you go along. We're going to have a total of 82 stitches at the end of this row, and I definitely recommend that because we are working with a fuzzy yarn, that throughout this process you count your stitches every row or every round. You'll find that it's going to help you tremendously when learning how to work with this yarn. So go ahead and finish up your first row, and we'll meet back up at the end and we'll talk about the next row in the pattern repeat. So at the end of your first row, you're going to end with a double crochet in your last chain. Now if that isn't the case for you, you've probably made some kind of error along the way and you'll want to troubleshoot that before moving on. So the first thing that we need to do is find the first stitch. And of course you can flip your work to the top and look for the V's, but I personally find that a little bit more difficult when you're working with a fuzzy or novelty yarn like this. What I like to do is turn it to the side and look for the little indentions, and I'll point those out as we go. So the first thing we need to look for is the first stitch, or it was that double crochet, the last one that we made from the previous row. We're going to single crochet there, so I'm just going to find the little indention and then single crochet into that stitch. Now our stitch pattern here isn't changing. We're just alternating single crochet, double crochet, single crochet, double crochet. And the only difference is that we are changing where we're putting them. So we're single crocheting in the double crochets and we're double crocheting in the single crochets. So keeping that in mind, we will look for the next stitch here, and I'm just looking for the next indentation. So you can see there's a dent here and here and here and here. So those are all the stitches that I need to work into. So the next stitch is a double crochet. And then I'm looking for that dent again. You see it right there. I'm going to single crochet there. Now the next stitch is a double crochet. You can kind of see that right there. That's your next stitch. Single crochet into the next. And so a couple of tips I would give you here. If you know this is a new experience for you, this fuzzy yarn, or if you're just having trouble with it in general. Couple of things that you can do is always count your stitches. We're going to have a total of 82 for this row. That's not going to change, and you can keep track of that until you're comfortable knowing where your stitches need to go. The other thing that you'll do is just keep an eye on what stitch you're adding where. So whenever we have a double crochet, there's sort of a bump that pops out. Now, whenever you have one of those little bumps popping out, you'll know that you have to have a single crochet on top of that. And if you don't, then you know that something has gone wrong along the way. You've either put two single crochets together or two double crochets together. And so you can sort of troubleshoot things that way. The other thing I would recommend is just what we're doing here, where we are locating the stitches from the side of the work, and you can feel free to sort of pull this out if that helps you to see things a little bit better. It's not going to make too much of a difference there. And always count your stitches. Okay, so we're going to finish up this pattern repeat for the second row. We'll talk briefly about what we're going to do at the end, and then we have a pretty long section of a repeat, so we'll talk about that coming up next. Now at the end of row 2, we want to end with a double crochet in the last stitch, or that last single crochet. Now at this point, all we need to do is repeat that last row. So row number 2 over and over until our work measures approximately 22 inches from this starting edge here. So that's what I'm going to do off camera. We're just going to repeat row number 2, and when we come back, we'll talk about what to do next. Now once your blanket measures approximately 22 inches, then we're ready to fasten off. So all we need to do is trim the tail, and then we'll pull the tail through the loop on our hook. And we'll just pull that tight. And now all we need to do is weave this in. So we're just going to simply weave this tail in, and then of course we have a tail where we started down here. So now what we're going to do is get started with the head. So we want to grab our color A, and just a couple of points. So at the beginning of each round, we're going to be chaining 2 because we'll be working with half double crochets. And the pattern indicates that that does not count as a stitch. So with that in mind, we're just going to create a slip knot. And we'll chain 3. To work in the round, what we want to do is find our first chain. That is going to be the foundation for the center of the ring. So we're going to work 10 half double crochets in the first chain. Now you'll see that I'm just rotating the piece as I go around to sort of make it work into a nice perfect little circle. Then once you have your 10 half double crochets, we need to join with a slip stitch to finish off the round. We're not going to join with those 2 chains that we had left over. So you'll want to pick those out, and they're a little bit difficult to see, again, because we have this fuzzy yarn. But you can see that I have my chain 2 right here. Okay, so they're going to be what's right next to where your hook is. And what you want to do is find the next post. So you can see it right here. And I'm going to join with a slip stitch to that stitch. And that's going to finish up round number 1. Okay, so for round number 2, we're going to chain 2 to start things off. But remember that chain 2 is not counting as a stitch. We're not going to do anything with it. What we want to do for this round is increase. And we need to increase by making 2 half double crochets into every single stitch. So we started out with 10 stitches from round 1. We'll end up with 20 stitches with round 2. And that's really important when you're working with fuzzy yarn that has a low stitch definition, because you'll need to count as you go along. So what I'm going to do is find the first stitch, or find the first post. You can kind of poke around and feel it with your fingers. That usually helps out. And we're just going to make our first half double crochet in that stitch. And what I recommend is using a stitch marker. Whenever you're working with, if you're unfamiliar with crocheting in the round, it's a good idea. But if you're working with yarn that is fuzzy and that you're having trouble seeing where the stitch is, just go ahead and mark that first stitch with your stitch marker. If you don't have a stitch marker, you can use a scrap piece of yarn or a bobby pin. Those work really well. And then when we come back around, you won't have to guess where to join with the slip stitch. You'll just join where your stitch marker is. So I'm going to make another half double crochet into that same stitch. So I have 2, and I'm going to count as I go along, because if I don't, then, it's really hard to go back and count your stitches. So just count as you go. And the same tip applies in the round as we talked about with the blanket. I like to look at my stitches from the side, not try to find the V at the top, because it kind of gets lost in the fuzziness of this yarn. So I just look for the gap, and it's not quite as pronounced in the round as it is when you're working in a flat row. But you can generally look where your stitches, where you worked them last, and just kind of guesstimate where the next stitch is going to be. Kind of poke around, feel it with your hook. and it should just fall right into place. The good thing about working with fuzzy yarn is that it's very forgiving of mistakes. So, you can't really see the stitches when you're working with it, which is a little frustrating when you're trying to work something. But the good thing is that the fuzz that's preventing you from seeing the stitches is also preventing anybody else from seeing mistakes. Now, when you've made it all the way around, you're sure that you have 20 stitches. Then we can simply release our stitch marker, or if you're afraid that when you release it you won't be able to see, then you can just put your hook into the stitch with the stitch marker, then pull it out. So you'll join with the slip stitch, and that's going to finish up round 2. Now on to round number 3. We're going to start by chaining 2, once again not counting as a stitch. And this round we're going to increase again, but we're not going to increase every stitch like we did on the previous round. We're going to increase every other stitch. And this is just a standard increase in the round. We're doing so in order to keep our circle round and flat. Now eventually, once we get to a certain point, we'll stop increasing and then we'll see the head start to take shape. But for now we need to make it a little bigger. So we're going to find the first stitch again and half double crochet in the first stitch. And once again, I'm just going to use my stitch marker to help me out. So we're just making 1 half double crochet in the first stitch. Then we're going to increase on the next. So we'll put 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. And then we'll go back to 1 half double crochet in the next. And 2 in the next. Now before we get too far along, I want to tell you that there will be a total of 30 stitches at the end of this round. Now you're going to have to keep track of 2 different things here. You're going to have to keep track of your repeat, so that's where we're doing 1 half double crochet and then 2 and then 1 and 2. So you need to keep track of where you are with that. And you'll also need to keep track of the total number of stitches, because that's going to help you since we can't really count them as easily as we would like. Now something else you can keep track of, to make sure that you're on the right track, is when you have half of the stitches that you're supposed to have. Like right now, I have a total of 15 half double crochets and I am directly across from my stitch marker. So I know that I'm pretty much on the right track. Now, if you are at 15 and you're, over in this direction or over here, then you know that something is a little bit off. So that's just another little tip to help you with working with this type of yarn. So the other checkpoint that you'll have to make sure that you're on the right track with your increases is that the very last stitch will have a total of 2 half double crochets in it. So you want to make sure that your repeat works out so that you have 2 half double crochets in the last, and that's going to be stitch 29 and stitch 30. And once you're finished with that, then I'm going to join with the slip stitch to that first stitch. Now moving on to round number 4, we're going to chain 2, again, not counting as a stitch, And we're going to increase again, but this time we're going to increase every third stitch. Okay, so that means we're going to make half double crochet, 2 half double crochets, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, and we're going to repeat that all the way around. So once again, we'll find the first stitch and we will half double crochet there. That's going to be the first in our stitch repeat, but I'm going to stop to mark it with my stitch marker. Then I'll find the next stitch and work a half double crochet there. And then I'm going to increase. So 2 half double crochets in the next. Then we have 1, 1, and 2. Okay, so that is the repeat that you need to keep track of for this round, and then you'll need to keep track of the total number of stitches. So the total number of stitches at the end of round 4 is 40. So keep track of that, keep working your round 4, and we'll meet back up at the other side. Now at the end of your round, once again, your checkpoint that you're on the right track is going to be that your last stitch will have 2 stitches in it. So stitch number 39 and stitch number 40 should go in your last stitch. And if that's not the case, then something has gone wrong at some point. You have messed up your repeat at some point. So you could have put, 2 half double crochets in a row. You could have done 3 singles instead of 2. I mean, there's any combination of things that you could have done. Now, if you feel comfortable with looking at the stitches, so you can kind of see the post for each one of the stitches. So you can see I have 2 there, and then there's 1 and 1. And then you can see that there's 2 here. So if you're comfortable with looking at that, you can see where your mistake is and then just rip back to that point. But if you just feel like you're completely lost, what I would recommend doing, unfortunately, is pulling out the entire round and just trying to pay a little bit more attention when you're working these first 4 rounds. Actually, starting with round 5, we are going to stop increasing so we can be a little bit more relaxed about our approach. So the last thing we'll do here is join with the slip stitch to the first stitch, and that will finish off round 4. So moving on to round number 5, we are going to batch a section here. So rounds 5 through 10 are all exactly the same. We're not going to increase anymore. We're just going to make 1 half double crochet into every stitch, and then we'll start to see the head take shape. We're going to start each one of those rounds by chaining 2. And again, that stitch is not counting as a stitch. Those 2 chains don't count as a stitch. So we're going to find our first stitch and make a half double crochet there. And half double crochet in the next. And we're just going to keep going until we get to the end of the round. Now, once again, you can use your stitch marker if you feel like you need help with keeping track of where you are. Now at the end of round 5, you will just simply join with the slip stitch to your first half double crochet. So this part isn't any different. And you can already start to see the head take shape. So what it likes to do is it likes to curl up inside out. So when I'm working on a circle or a piece like this, I'll just simply try to make it go the other way, because the stitches that are facing you while you're crocheting, that is the right side of the stitches. Now you can't tell too much of a difference, but there is a slightly different texture on the other side. So now all you'll need to do is crochet rounds 6 through 10 exactly like we demonstrated. So 1 half double crochet into every stitch, and we'll meet back up at the end of that and we'll talk about what to do next. So once you finish crocheting through round 10, our head should look something like this. And now we're going to proceed with round 11, and we're going to decrease in the same increments that we increased. So we're going to begin round 11 by chaining 2, and again this chain 2 does not count as a stitch, and we just need to locate our first stitch. Now we're going to decrease by making a half double crochet 2 together. So we just want to find our first stitch, yarn over, and insert our hook into that first stitch. We'll pull up a loop, and then yarn over again. Insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. And to finish the stitch, we'll yarn over and pull through all the loops on our hook. So we've just decreased by 1 stitch with that half double crochet 2 together, and we're going to start the repeat. So we're going to half double crochet in the next stitch, and half double crochet in the next, and then half double crochet 2 together. And then we'll just repeat that around. So at the end of your round, you should end up with 2 half double crochets in your last 2 stitches. So 1 half double crochet and another half double crochet in those last 2 stitches. And at the end of this round, you'll have a total of 30 half double crochet, and these half double crochet 2 together counts as 1. So you'll locate that first stitch, you'll join with a slip stitch to finish the round. Okay, for round number 12, we're going to begin by chaining 2. Again, doesn't count as a stitch. And we'll locate our first 2 stitches. We're going to half double crochet 2 together there. Now this time, instead of having 2 single half double crochets, we're just going to put 1 half double crochet in the next, and then we're going to jump into the half double crochet 2 together. So we're just changing up the increments at which we're decreasing. Now half double crochet in the next, and half double crochet 2 together. That's our repeat for this round. You're just going to finish that up, and we'll meet back up on the other side. And at the end of the round, we should finish off with just 1 half double crochet. And then we will join with the slip stitch to our first stitch, so that half double crochet 2 together. Now at the end of round 12, we should have a total of 20 half double crochet stitches, and we just have 1 more round to go. Moving on to round number 13, our final round for the head. We're going to begin by chaining 2, and what we need to do for this round is half double crochet 2 together all the way around. And at the end of your round, you will find your first half double crochet, and you'll join with the slip stitch there. And then we can fasten off. Now when you do so, leave yourself a tail that's maybe 10 or 12 inches long. We're going to use that tail to tie it or to sew it onto the body. And we'll just pull that tail through the loop on our hook, and we're ready to go. So what you'll need to do from here is simply stuff this with some type of polyfill, whatever you have available, And the next section, we're going to cover the facial features. Next, we're going to start on the face. We're going to grab color C. We'll create our slip knot. And chain 12. Now we're going to count back to the third chain. So we're going to count 1, 2, and this is my third chain from the hook. I'm going to half double crochet in that chain. So what we're creating here is a little bit of a long oval. So we're going to make 1 half double crochet into the next chain. And we're going to do that all the way until we get to the last chain. Now when you reach the last chain, we're going to make 5 half double crochets in the last chain. And we're just going to allow that to let us work around to the other side. So we're going to start adding stitches now in this direction. So that was 1, 2, 3, and I'm just rotating my work as I go. 4 and 5. Now if you would like, you can work over the tail at this point so you don't have to weave it in later. Now to work up the next side, we're going to just work in the same chain across from the stitches that we already have. We need to do that 8 times. So we'll make 1 half double crochet into each of the next 8 chains. That's 1, 2, 3, and now you can see the way that I am locating these chains is I'm just looking for the little hole that pops up next. So I'm kind of pushing it out with my finger behind the work, and that's where I can see that hole. And you can see the next one right there. Now when you come to the last chain, we're going to make 4 half double crochets there, and it'll match up with the other side because we have 1 half double crochet in this already. So we will have a total of 5. Then we're going to join with a slip stitch to our first half double crochet, so we're ignoring that chain again. And that finishes up round number 1. Now moving on to round 2, this is the final round for our face. We want to chain 2, and this is not counting as a stitch. We're going to make 1 half double crochet into each of the next 10 stitches. Now you can mark this first one if you'd like to help you know where to join at the end of the round. Then once you have your 10 half double crochets, then we're going to make 2 half double crochets into each of the next 3 stitches. So we're going to increase a little bit here, and that is just helping us to keep this piece flat. Now we're going to make 1 half double crochet into each of the next 10. And then we're going to make 2 half double crochets into each of the next 3. And we'll join with a slip stitch to our first half double crochet. And we can fasten off now. We're completely finished. And once again, you'll leave yourself a longer tail. We're going to use this to sew the face onto the head. Now we're moving on to the next element here. We're going to work on the eye patches. So we're going to grab color B and create a slip knot. And these are super easy. They're really fast. We need to make 2 of these. We'll place that slip knot on our hook, and we need to chain 3. So we'll locate the first chain that we made, the one that's right next to our slip knot, and we need to work 10 half double crochets in this stitch. So this is really similar to what we did for the start of the head. We're just going to work 10 half double crochets and just rotate our work as we go, so it makes a nice even circle. Then once you have your 10 half double crochet, you'll find the first stitch that you made, and you'll join with the slip stitch there. Okay, and that finishes up our eye. So I'm going to leave myself about 6 or 8 inches of a tail. We'll use that to sew it on, and then we'll just pull that tail through the loop on our hook. And that finishes up the eye patch. So you'll need to make 1 more of these. And next we're going to move on to the feet. So the last element we have to work on before we start sewing everything together are the feet. So we're going to grab color C. We'll create a slip knot. And we'll chain 3. And we're going to find our first chain again. We'll make 8 half double crochets in that chain. So we're starting off working in the round, just like we did for the eye patch and the head. Only this time we have 8 half double crochets. Now when you have your 8 half double crochets, you'll join with a slip stitch to your first stitch there. And that finishes up round number 1. For round number 2, we're going to start by chaining 2. And again, this does not count as a stitch. And we're going to increase this round. So we need to make 2 half double crochets into every single stitch. So we'll have a total of 16. So at the end of round 2, you will just find your first half double crochet and join with a slip stitch there. Rounds 3 and 4, we're not going to increase anymore. So we're going to start off both of these rounds by chaining 2 and then just make 1 half double crochet into every stitch. Now here we are at the end of round 3 and we need to find our first half double crochet, and we're going to slip stitch there to finish off the round. And then we're just going to repeat that round for round number 4. So we're going to chain 2 to start things off. We'll make 1 half double crochet into every stitch, and at the end of the round we'll join with a slip stitch to our first half double crochet. For the 5th and final round, we're going to chain 2. And we're going to half double crochet 2 together the entire round. So we're going to locate our first stitch, wrap the yarn and insert into the next stitch, and finish off our half double crochet 2 together and repeat that. So at the end of this round, we will have a total of 8 stitches. So we'll have 8 half double crochet 2 together. And when you finish up the round, you'll find your first stitch and join with the slip stitch there. And once again, you'll leave yourself a tail that's about 8 to 10 inches or so that you can tie and sew this onto your lovey. We'll pull that through. Now you're going to make 4 of these feet. Once you get that done, the last thing we need to do is assemble. So let's look at how we're going to assemble our loveys. The first part of the assembly that I'm going to demonstrate is the eye patch to the face. So you want to situate them so they're just right on the edge. I have the tail of the eye patch threaded, and I'm just going to work it into the back side. And then I'm going to come up from the back and catch the next stitch. Jump over to the next, work it just straight through the back there. And you'll just work this all the way around. It's a good idea to maybe go two times around. That way you know the eye patch is nice and secure. It's not going to be pulled off or anything like that. Now once you're certain it's nice and secure, so the back side's probably not going to look pretty, it's okay because it's going to be hidden. We're just going to weave this in under a few stitches just to make sure it doesn't come back out. And we can trim that off. And we'll repeat for the other eye patch. So we just want to situate that one along the other side here, and we'll sew that on just like this. So the next thing we want to do is take a little bit of color A, and we're going to make the little facial features, so like a nose and a mouth. So we're going to put the nose just right in the middle of the 2 eye patches. I'm going to come in from the back side and go forward. And then I'm just going to go over 1 stitch. Now we could leave it with just one strand like that, but it may get a little bit lost and you won't see it as well. So I'm just going to go back through the same holes. And maybe even do that one more time. Okay, so when you have that finished, you can just simply trim this off. And really, you don't even need to weave in these ends. We can go ahead and tie these off because we're going to sew the face onto the head, so you're not going to see any of what's behind here. Now the next thing we're going to do is make a little mouth, and we're just going to jump down to the very next row. So we have our nose here, we see this next little ridge, that's where we're going to be working the little mouth. And you can just start from any side. So on the first pass, you can kind of see I went in this direction, but I still have these little holes here. So I want to fill them up. So I just brought the needle in through the top, and now I'm going to just go down into the spot right there, that in between those stitches, and then pull that through. So you see how that kind of closed that gap. Now I'm going to insert my needle into the spot that's right in front of that other gap, and then down into the next little space. And there we go. So we have our little mouth, and we can trim this tail and tie it off just like we did for the nose. The last little detail for the face is we're going to make a little white line under each of the eye patches. So that's going to be using color C. So we're going to do this kind of like we did for the mouth. We're going to just pull it through and go down. Then once we have that finished, we can again just trim and tie this off. And now you'll just want to repeat that for the second eye patch. The next thing we're going to do is sew the face onto the head, and we're just going to use the tail from the face. Now if you find it easier, you can pin the face into position, and then you don't have to worry about it slipping around. But what I also like to do is just watch my stitch line and just try to keep it aligned that way. So for this, I'm just going to do a series of whip stitches. I'm just going to catch the brown or the head and then just kind of go up in through the face. And then when you pull that tight, it really conceals those stitches and you can't see them. Now you'll want to stop and look, especially if you don't have this pinned, every so often, just to make sure you're on the right track. And the other thing you'll want to be careful of is keeping your stitches underneath, try to keep them underneath the face. So if you come all the way down here and then grab, then you're going to see that line. So you want to just grab some of the yarn that's right up next to where the face is, and that's going to help conceal these white stitches on the brown. Then once you've made it all the way around, what I like to do, since we really can't tie this off because our head is stuffed and we, can't get into the inside there, I just like to weave it in along one of the edges. And then you can trim that tail off. The next thing we're going to do is sew the head onto the body. And what I've done is just folded this up into fourths. So that way I can find the middle of the blanket. So it will be this little section right here. So that's where I want to sew the head. So we're going to take the tail from the head and just catch some of the stitches from the blanket and pull that through. So I'm just going to work around. Now you can go around the opening in the circle if you'd like. I also find that it's a little bit easier, since we need to close this up a little bit, is to come back down into like right across. So I'm down here at the bottom. I'm just going to come into this little section and catch that on the blanket. And we'll pull that nice and tight. Then we can just work this down . And just work it around. Now it's always a good idea to go around again just to make sure you have your stitches secure. We want this head to stay on. We don't want it to be, pulled off or anything like that. So I'm just going to go back around and make sure everything is nice and tidy, and then sort of seal up any holes. So I can kind of see a hole there. So I'm just going to put a stitch there. And then once you have it nice and secure, what I would recommend is just taking your needle and going down in to the wrong side of the work. And then just weave in your end, just like you would if it were a tail. So just weave this in along the back side. Now the last step is to sew a foot to each corner. So I'm just going to thread the tail of the foot on my darning needle and then just run it up through the point. And I like to be pretty strategic about this. So we have a little hole down at the bottom, and I just want to situate it so that the corner of the blanket kind of just sits right in the hole. And then I'm just going to go back through here to secure that a little bit. And then you'll just sew it on like normal. Now this is another one of those elements that you really want to make sure it's nice and secure so it doesn't come off. Now once you have it good and secure, then you can just weave in the tail along the stitches on the back of the foot. And then you'll just repeat that for the other 3 feet. That wraps up our demonstration on the Sleepy Sloth Lovie, yet another amazing free pattern from Yarnspirations.com. So big thanks to them for always providing us with really great project ideas. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial and you like my teaching style, you may also find a lot of good resources at behookedcrochet.com. I have a whole slew of crochet pattern and tutorials, as well as knitting pattern and tutorials. So you can check all of that out at behookedcrochet.com. And until then, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.